Wow, this is bright up here. Hi, good morning. I think it's still morning. Oh, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I think we all are here this weekend because we are somehow, in one way or another, connected to Duchenne muscular dystrophy, whether you be a patient, a parent, siblings, researchers, treating physicians, advocates for Duchenne's. We are here because we're somehow connected. I promise our session won't make you cry, but you can cry if you want to. That was really touching. Now I want to go and do that trail. So we have 4 panelists today. I think as all of us are here because we are interested to learn more about research. And over the last decades, there has been significant advances in treatments and research for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Despite having 5 FDA-approved treatments that are available currently, there's still quite a bit of work to do. And as innovative therapies are advancing, we are always in hope and a race to cure Duchenne. So I think, as all of you guys are aware, there are a number of sponsored biotech companies that are available and here today to display and present their work. The 4 on our panelists today are not all of them, but they're really, I think it's a good representation. That's kind of scary. I don't think I've seen myself that tall before. So
behind there too.
Thanks, Mindy. I will sit down when Mindy stands up because she's going to be much taller than me. So I appreciate you guys taking time today, and we're just going to move on to our 4 panelists today. First, we'll start with Mindy. Mindy is a patient advocacy group with Santera Pharmaceuticals. Matt Klein is Chief Operating Officer with Ptc Therapeutics. Abby Bronson is VP Patient Advocacy and External Innovation with Edgewise Therapeutics. And Dan Paulson, VP of Clinical Development with Capricor. So we'll start with a little bit about myself. I think some of you may know me. I'm a director of clinical research at Rare Disease Research. I'm also a co-director of MDA Clinic at the University of Alabama. This is a slide from one of the recent paper in 2001 in Cell Therapy. As we approach the right treatment for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, there are multiple targeted areas that would be effective or beneficial for the treatment of Duchenne. It all starts with the mutations of Duchenne, of the DMD gene, of the dystrophin gene, leading to, of course, the dysfunction of the dystrophin protein. With that, you see membrane changes, signaling abnormality, leading ultimately to inflammation, muscle atrophy, necrosis, and ultimately fibrosis is, in layman's term, is the scarring of the muscle tissue. So over time, this cycle occurs over and over again because of the abnormal dystrophin or lack of dystrophin or non-functional dystrophin, leading to then progressive muscle weakness. Now, there are multiple opportunities that can be intervened or treated in this pathway. And you can see that a number of our currently approved therapies are in the exon skipping, which then targeting the mutations. And then downstream, some of the consequences and cascade are other treatments like inflammatory targeting, targeting and prevention of the muscle injuries as well as the scarring. So this is why we're here today, and we have our 4 panelists who will then explain sort of some of the mechanisms and their work in this field. So I'll start with Mindy. Do you want me to introduce you?
Sure.
So,
All right, I can do it.
okay.
Okay, I guess I'll stand. I think it's quite funny that I get to go first after 2.5 years of Zoom presentations, and I'm the very first presenter from the companies. I'm Mindy Cameron. I'm patient advocacy lead at Santera Pharmaceuticals. I'm very happy to be here today. Cure Duchenne asked us to participate on this panel, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do so. I have some personal experience as well with Duchenne. I have a soon-to-be 21-year-old son who lives with the diagnosis. This is our forward-looking statement, which just reminds everyone that there is no guarantee that any of the research or projects described will succeed and that any new products will be brought to market. This presentation is for educational and research purposes only. I'd like to start with reminding you all a little bit about Santera Pharmaceuticals. The company's global headquarters is in Switzerland, and its North American headquarters is located in the Boston area. The company's been working in the Duchenne muscular dystrophy space since 2008. And many may remember that we had a therapeutic candidate called Ptc or idebenone. I think the company and the global community, it's fair to say, were very disappointed in 2020 when our stage 3 clinical trial failed and we discontinued development of that therapeutic possibility. But the company remained very committed to the Duchenne space, the Duchenne community, and we stayed the course. In 2020, we acquired worldwide rights to a molecule called vamorolone. And before we acquired that molecule, it was developed by a very well-known Duchenne research scientist named Eric Hoffman, who started his own company called Reveragen. So now Santera owns worldwide rights to vamorolone, and we are working with Reveragen. Since the beginning of this year, we've been focused on building a North American team led by President Stephanie Brown, and we're planning for the launch of vamorolone if the FDA agrees that the potential therapy is safe and effective. This slide also refers to our development of a pulmonary therapy, very early stage in cystic fibrosis. So I want to talk a little bit about the use of corticosteroids in the treatment of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's very well established. I think we all can agree that it has become a foundational therapy and is considered standard of care in Duchenne. This slide shows some of the significant ways in which corticosteroids and their long-term use can extend function in Duchenne patients. Not only do they typically prolong the ability to walk by as much as 3 years, there is some experience. We've had many kids, thousands of kids are on corticosteroids, and we know that they can also provide important extension of strength in the upper body. Many patients and their families take them, and I think it's fair to say that they do help maintain health and strength, and they may ultimately help extend lifespan. However, we recognize that the long-term and the short-term use of corticosteroids do produce adverse side effects in some boys treated with them. This slide shows the approximate frequency of some of these side effects in 2 large studies, one done by Luca Bello in 2015 and another published by Brenda Wong in 2017. So I want to talk a little bit about my own personal experience and my son's experience with the use of long-term corticosteroids. He's very typical. He's had a lot of benefits from them, but he's also had some of the side effects. He began taking daily corticosteroids at the age of 3, following his diagnosis at age 2.5. We have increased his dosage according to his weight, according to guidelines, up to a certain point, and he has remained on daily, uninterrupted corticosteroid therapy for over 17 years now. He's also sustained every single side effect that's shown on this slide. So He completely lost the ability to walk at age 12 following a leg fracture. And at age 15, he suffered fractures which led to an acutely life-threatening condition called fat embolism syndrome, or FES. As you can see on this slide, my son's experience with fractures specifically is not uncommon. Some side effects related to bone health, including bone growth and growth velocity or stunting of growth. We also have a lot of reports and observations of behavior changes, Cushingoid appearance, weight gain. These are all very common. I think everyone can agree that these are very commonly experienced among families. As a parent and a caregiver and a longtime advocate for patients and families diagnosed with Duchenne, it has always been my goal to work with others who are trying to develop more therapies, more knowledge, more support, more options, and importantly, more good quality years of life. We're expanding life expectancy, and we want those years to be good years, good quality of life. I live with Duchenne every day, like most of you in this room, and I'm really, really excited about the potential of any new therapies, including all of them up here. So turning to some specifics about vamorolone. It's an investigational drug. I want to make that very clear. Its chemical structure was designed specifically to potentially separate the beneficial effects of corticosteroids from some of their adverse side effects. I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to try the pointer. I'm going to test it out for you all. Oh, it works. I'm not very good at this, though. How do you, or do I point it up here?
Yep.
Uh-huh. Anyway, there's a double bond in there. That's why we're different.
All about it.
So there's a change in the way the chemical structure is, and we think that this double bond is going to bind differently to the glucocorticoid receptors, and by doing so, it will lead to less activation of genes responsible for some of the side effects commonly seen with corticosteroid therapy. I invite you to visit our booth. It's number 16 in the exhibitor showcase. If you have any questions about the molecule, its mechanism of action, I want to point out two of my colleagues here. We have a member of our field medical team, Jackie Desiborg. Jackie, can you wave? And we have our new Vice President of Medical Affairs for North America, Mike Stevenson. So we're all three here. We're all going to be around the conference, so please feel free to ask us any questions. So where are we in the development of vamorolone? As many of you know, vamorolone started its clinical trials back 7 years ago. Since then, the phase 2A and 2B vision studies have been completed, and most of the participants from those studies are now on a long-term extension program and have remained on therapy. In total, the vamorolone program includes over 200 patient years of treatment exposure in 160 boys. As you can see, there are many, many published papers about our clinical studies and our clinical trials. Those links to those studies can be found in our virtual booth and here on site. More publications are planned for the coming months. Very notably, and as reported in many company press releases, we are in the midst of an NDA submission. We began our rolling submission to FDA in late March of this year, and it's expected to be completed by the end of next month, and everything is on track for that to be happening. So in Europe, Santera plans to submit a marketing authorization application for vamorolone in Q3 2022. In conclusion, I just want to thank everybody who's participated in the trials, and importantly for the parents who have supported the participants. Clinical trial participation is not easy. We are very, very thankful for all the families and all the organizations, individuals who have supported the development of this new potential therapy. We again are in booth number 16 in the exhibitor hall, so please stop by and see us. We have Swiss chocolate. So thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Woo! Thank you, Ms. Michelle. I'm Matt, I'm Matt Klein. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Ptc Therapeutics, which means my job is to oversee all of our drug development programs, which are in many areas, but of course, many in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's so great to be back in person and to meet people face to face and really experience community in a way that we haven't been able to over the past couple of years. I'm going to be sharing with you today information about our drug deflazacort, which has been on the market in the United States for several years, and the evidence that we've accumulated showing its safety and effectiveness for people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy of all ages and at all stages of disease. For those of you not familiar with Ptc Therapeutics, we were founded by our current CEO, Stu Peltz, 24 years ago, with the single purpose of using really, really good and innovative science to develop therapies for people affected by rare diseases. And in the beginning, it wasn't about just any rare disease. It was actually, the company was started with a focus to develop therapies for people affected by Duchenne muscular dystrophy. That was our focus when we started, and it remains a core part of our mission today. We initiated the first ever drug discovery and development programs for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and we also had the first ever approved therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and that was Adalurin, which was approved in Europe in 2014. We then had the ability to, with the approval of deflazacort in 2017, offer a second therapy, and this therapy, deflazacort, is for all patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Initially, it was for patients age 5 and older, but as of 2019, deflazacort is available for all Duchenne muscular dystrophy patients age 2 years and older. As I mentioned, while we started 24 years ago with a focus on Duchenne muscular dystrophy, I'm proud to say that that remains a focus today. Every part of our company is focused on working to bring moments to people affected by Duchenne muscular dystrophy and to continue research and development efforts beyond what we're able to provide today, with the hope that in the future we can continue to help bring effective therapies to people affected by Duchenne muscular dystrophy. As we've already heard from many, the lifetime use of corticosteroids has clearly been shown to translate to overall better outcomes for people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, having important effects on preservation of ambulation, other aspects of movement, climbing stairs, being able to rise from the floor, and also importantly, important effects on preserving lung function as well as heart function. But we also know that there's side effects, as we've just heard. And so the question is it possible to have a therapy that gives more of the good, does more to improve function beyond what corticosteroids can do, with less of the bad, fewer of the side effects that we know are so impactful to life? And deflazacort has been shown to do that, give more of the good with less of the bad. It's the only corticosteroid currently approved in the United States for all patients with DMD, as I said, age 2 years and older. And it's given by mouth, and it's given once a day. The evidence showing the benefits of deflazacort, particularly relative to prednisone and prednisolone, has been extensively studied. Not one study, not 2 studies, not 3 studies. We have 14 studies in over 2,000 boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy with long-term follow-up showing evidence that we can provide benefit beyond what has been shown with corticosteroids, so longer preservation of function and other important impacts on everyday life with less of the side effects. There's studies showing that daily deflazacort is better tolerated than daily prednisone. Less of those bad side effects, like less problems with weight gain, for example. We've also have studies that show if you were on prednisone and switched to deflazacort, that many of the problems that boys were having with prednisone, such as inability to take it every day, problems with tolerability, went away, got better in 90 to 95% of patients. So if you're on prednisone and having benefits, but a lot of the side effects, we've been able to show that switching over to deflazacort can address a lot of the problems that were being experienced while on prednisone. Importantly, we've been able to show that daily deflazacort maintained the ability to walk for 2.7 years beyond corticosteroids, really, really important. In addition, we've been able to show impact on other aspects of function, whether that be rising from the floor, hand-to-mouth coordination, other aspects of function that allow for longer period of independence, longer period of self-care, longer ability to play video games, have quality of life. And so really been able to show that while there have been benefits with corticosteroids, particularly prednisone, that with deflazacort, we've been able to add more. Again, as I said from the beginning, can we get more benefits than with prednisone with fewer of the side effects? And study after study continues to show that that is indeed the case. In addition to those 14 studies, we're continuing to do research to try to better understand the benefits of deflazacort relative to prednisone, and also better understand, are these benefits true across different populations of patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy? Is it true for those younger boys? And then how about young adults? How about people with Duchenne who are no longer ambulatory? Are the benefits there? And the answer to that is yes. We continue to do research that shows that across the spectrum of disease, regardless of severity and regardless of age, that these benefits continue to shine through. We most recently had data from a study that looked at 200 boys over 48 weeks, again comparing prednisone to deflazacort, and we once again continue to see these benefits. For example, deflazacort resulted in 37 meters greater walk distance on the 6-minute walk test. That tells us that we're preserving the ability to walk, and also, which we know leads to other benefits down the line with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, such as delayed loss of ambulation and some of the other complications of the disease that can occur over time. We also saw that some of these benefits were stronger in older boys, so that we're able to say that we're, again, showing benefit in people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, regardless of age. And so overall, when we look at deflazacort, we're able to extend periods of ambulation, as well as over the lifetime of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, be able to provide other important benefits, such as preservation of hand-to-mouth function, preservation of lung function, and preservation of heart function, which again all strengthen the use, or the rationale for the use of deflazacort for boys with Duchenne. So in conclusion, I too want to thank the community. As Deborah said in her introduction today, the drug development process is rarely a straight line. It's a really, really hard journey, and it takes a partnership. It takes a partnership of patients, families, scientists, physicians, companies, all of us. We all have to work together to do this really challenging thing, which is to bring therapies to patients that have true benefit and that are safe for use. That's been our focus and our commitment from when we started PTC 24 years ago. It remains our focus and our commitment today to continue to use really good science to bring important and meaningful therapies to patients with Duchenne. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Abby Bronson. I'm the VP of Patient Advocacy and External Innovation at Edgewise Therapeutics. And first of all, I just want to say that I got off the Camino on Tuesday. I flew here from Spain. So that was such a motivational, inspirational. I got what they were talking about. I work at Edgewise, so I can only do it for 10 days, but I will be back to finish it. So today I'm going to talk to you about our novel small molecule. We call it EDG-5506. It doesn't really have a name yet, and how it's intended to protect dystrophic muscle. This is our forward-looking statement. This is an educational. We don't have an approved compound in any territory. Before I begin, I always like to start these talks a little bit about describing how we approach patient advocacy at Edgewise, and I think the title says it all. We really are better when we listen to you. Sometimes it seems like you're just receiving a lot of information from the sponsors, and that's important. We do. We have to give you information, We have to create disease awareness. We want to educate. We want to make sure that every individual has the resources they need to live the best life they can. And we partner with the advocacy organizations to do that, like Cure Duchenne. But we also listen to you, and that information is really valuable. We use that input to inform how we design our clinical trials. How can we make the endpoints better? How can we make the travel schedule better? Things like that. We also use the input, your experiences, your journey with the disease. That helps to establish the therapeutic context that the regulators use for making those risk-benefit decisions. So thank you very much. We are honored to be standing alongside you on this journey. So our approach at Edgewise is a little bit different, and we're attempting or intending to protect susceptible muscle fibers. And in the literature and in our own work too, we found that some muscle fibers are more susceptible to the damage that is caused by the lack of functional dystrophin during contraction, during like moving around. So we've made an investigational therapy, EDG-5506, that's designed to protect these fibers. We've done a lot of work in animals, and all the preclinical work that you hear about, and we've looked in mice, we've looked in dogs, and in that work, EDG-5506 protected those susceptible muscle fibers and prevented the long-term damage that you see. That's the hallmark of Duchenne. So that gave us the confidence to move forward. So this picture, and we're kind of starting back at the basics a little bit, but this picture is a muscle fiber, and there's 3 key proteins that I want to talk about here. The first one, you can see the arrows pointing at dystrophin. We all know dystrophin. That's what we talk about all the time. And dystrophin, as you can see, it's connecting the bottom structure, which we call the sarcomere, to the cell membrane, and then in turn, that little cluster of proteins is connecting to other clusters of proteins to other cells, muscle fibers. So that dystrophin's acting like a connector. It's like, and it protects. What it does is it makes sure that all those muscle fibers are working together, so when one contracts, the other ones are all working in a coordinated fashion. So the other 2 proteins that are really important to know about are myosin and actin. So myosin and actin are 2 proteins that they work together. So when your brain sends a signal to your leg muscle to move, the myosins and the actins are working together to create the power, to create the force that you need to move. So that's why when your boys were born and you looked at them and they could goo-goo and gaga and roll over and all the things that little boys do, that's because they have the myosin and actin that they need to create the movement for everyday activities. It's over time, without the dystrophin, without the protection, without that coordinated movement, that the damage begins to occur. So let's imagine, what does it look like if there is no dystrophin? So here's the same cell. This time, the dystrophin is not there. You can see the connection's not there. The membrane is completely, trying to contract. It's not coordinated. There's holes. The myosin and the actin are all in disarray. So this is a very unstabilized muscle contraction. And unchecked, if you let this go, cycle after cycle after cycle, you're going to have damage. That's going to lead to fibrosis and functional decline. So what we've decided to do, again, we know that there's the susceptible muscle fibers, the fast muscle fibers. So we've created our compound, which is intended to come in, provide a little bit of stabilization, modulate how the myosin works a little bit, and that decreases the stress during mechanical contraction, and it allows the muscles to function, we hope, without damage. That's the hypothesis. That's what we're testing. So I'm going to show you all of this in a little video of a mouse finger muscle now, if it works. Let's see. So the one on the left is dystrophic muscle, so that's like an MDX mouse that is untreated. And we're contracting it, we're making it contract. We've sped it up so we don't have to wait a long time to see the contractions. But you can visibly see what's going to happen over time, so just watch on the left. You can see those little sarcomeres that I talked about, those muscle fibers. When they're unprotected, they start to hypercontract, and eventually they turn into these little globs. And is it going? Yeah, yes. There it goes. So it takes a little bit of time to run through this video. The little mouse muscle on the right, these are very thin slices of mouse finger muscles that you can almost see through. This has been treated with some of the compound, and you can see that you don't see the changes that you do on the untreated side. So there are those little blobs coming, and you can see how the fibers are really starting to get damaged. And the one on the right, that is not happening. So that's the damage that we're trying to prevent on the left side. So in summary, EDGE 5506, we're developing it for Becker and Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's an oral pill. It's intended to preserve, as we've just gone over, intended to preserve and potentially improve the function in Becker and Duchenne. There's no mutational requirements. Any mutation could potentially benefit from this therapy. We went over how there's these particularly susceptible muscle fibers. They're the ones that we're trying to protect first. We think it can be used alone, but because of the mechanism of action and the novelty, we think can be used in combination with other therapeutic approaches that are, either approved or in research for the dystrophinopathies. And I think it's really important. I think that Dr. Phan, she pointed out that sort of like that overview of all the different therapies. Our mechanism of action works right at the top of that. So we're trying to stop the damage where it begins before it just cascades out of control. In terms of the trials that we have ongoing and the ones that are in planning, we have a 12-month open label study that's ongoing, and that's in adults with Becker, and it includes we had some adult Becker men in our phase 1 trial, and they're all taking part in this trial, plus a handful of others are in there. We're supporting a natural history study in Becker, and that's for ages 8 to 65. We're also planning a phase 2 in Becker in ambulatory adolescent and adult males with Becker, and that's we hope to get that off the ground in the first half of 2022, which is very shortly ending, so very soon. And we're also in the planning stages for a study in ambulatory boys in Duchenne, which we hope to start in the second half of this year. So we're actively planning that trial as well. So that's the end of the presentation. I'd like to thank the whole entire community, everybody, the sponsors, the clinicians, the researchers, the patients, the parents, the caregivers, everybody for making this possible. And we have a booth. We're in the exhibit hall. Our CSO, the co-founder of the company, is with us, so he can answer all the really tough science questions you guys have. And thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Dan Paulson. I'm Vice President of Development for Ptc Therapeutics. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk with you about our program with CAP 1002 in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So the forward-looking statements, and importantly, please understand that CAP 1002 is an investigational product now, a new drug, and we're currently studying it in Duchenne. So what's the background of CAP 1002? This is a cell-based therapy. This is heart tissue that comes from donated hearts that have been scheduled for transplant, but for technical reasons have been pulled back from transplant. Certain cells within that tissue are isolated, and then they're produced and manufactured. And so it's really not gene therapy, it's not it's not stem cell therapy. This is an allogenic transplant. How does it work? It's not been fully established, but cells communicate with other cells, and they do so by exosomes. So a cell forms a very small balloon. This comes off of the cell, and then this is transported where it merges with other cells. And when it merges with another cell, the contents of that exosome are placed into the cell that it merges with. And so these exosomes, once the cell therapy is infused through an IV formulation, they lodge in the pulmonary vasculature, and then for the next weeks and months, they stay there and they secrete exosomes, and these exosomes then communicate with other cells. The target tissues that they communicate with: skin cells, connective tissue cells, white blood cells, and importantly, muscle cells. It's a cardiac muscle cell, and importantly, it communicates with other muscle cells. And when it does so, the contents of this exosome helps those muscle cells retain function, decreases swelling. It's an anti-inflammatory, anti-fibrotic, it prevents scarring, and importantly, it stimulates muscle growth. So we've investigated CAP1002 in several clinical trials, and we've studied it in over 200 volunteers so far. So what is the target population that we're looking at with CAP1002? Well, the target population, patients that we're really looking for, are young boys who are non-ambulatory, age 10 and greater. And this has been the target population for our HOPE program. So HOPE Duchenne was the first study that was performed, and the cell line at that time was given via intracoronary, so it was injected into coronary vessels, and it was done in very early stages of development, and the endpoints from HOPE Duchenne were positive. We saw some signals that the cell line was really working the way we expected it to work. And that led us then to a phase 2 trial called HOPE 2. That's complete, and I'll share with you some of the data of that, and we were pleased with the data that we saw, and I think you will be. Just published in The Lancet about 2 months ago. And we continue with HOPE 2 OLE. This is an open label extension, and some of the boys in HOPE 2 have now been on open label extension of CAP for almost 2 years, and we continue to follow them for safety reasons and also for function. I'm excited today to tell you about HOPE 3. This is our phase 3 trial, following up on the results of HOPE 2, and we're just now starting HOPE 3, and that's what I'm really excited to tell you about. In fact, we've just activated our first centers in the US, and we're hoping over the next week or 2 or 3 weeks to screen our first patient into the phase 3 pivotal trial. So the HOPE 2 results, again, were published in The Lancet. Please, if you have the opportunity, please read this publication. It's a very interesting study, and this is actually the outcome data from HOPE 2. So HOPE 2 basically looked at, and it studied boys that were, again, 10 and older, non-ambulatory, and what it did was we looked at upper limb function. We did it by the pull, and you can see that the upper limb function in these boys over 1 year, if they were on CAP, it slowed the progression of disease by 71% in 1 year. And importantly, you see that the curve separated very early after baseline, which is when the infusions began. At the end of 1 year, there was a difference of 2.8 in their performance of upper limb score, and a difference of 1 is considered clinically relevant. So 2.8, and even though this was a phase 2 study, I'm not a statistician, but this number down here, a p-value of 0.01, means that this was significant. This didn't happen by chance, okay? What really excited me about HOPE 2 was this, the cardiac, the heart function. These boys, after 1 year, actually numerically had heart function above the baseline, above. And you see how wide those curves separated, 107% slowing of progression of disease. The safety data from it, efficacy data looked good, safety data looked good also. We saw some infusion reactions, which would be expected with an infusion of a cell-based therapy, but we were able to control these by prophylactic steroid and antihistamine infusions the day before. So the safety summary looked good, and it continues to look good in the open label extension. So that leads us then, if the phase 2 data looks good, it leads us to phase 3, and this is what I'm excited to tell you about today, and I really hope to create some interest among the group to come and see us at the booth and maybe consider learning more about HOPE-3. So HOPE-3 is the phase 3 trial. It's a 1-year duration with 4 infusions. It starts with screening and a 30-day period for screening and a dosing at day 1. There's 4 doses over the entire year, and at the end of 12 months, we do functional and safety assessments, and that will be the primary endpoint for the study. We also have a 1-year open label extension. So this is a double-blinded. For every boy that ends up on CAP, there will be a boy that ends up on placebo. But at the end of 1 year, everybody will receive CAP in the open label extension for an additional year. The eligibility, if you're 10 and older, if you have DMD, and if you're a PUL classification of 2 to 6, you're eligible really to be screened into HOPE-3. There's a larger list of eligibility criteria, but the key criteria is that your heart has to be strong, EF of 35 and greater, your body mass index less than 45, and this is because of interference with the PUL, with the performance of upper limb. It also can interfere with the MRI. But what we're looking for is we're looking for boys that are pretty stable in their course, okay, of disease. So our HOPE-3 program is currently enrolling. We have centers across the US. In fact, we have some investigators right here. Please give me a call or email me if you're interested in hearing more about it or screening. And we have a booth. Nina's sitting at the booth, and she has lots more information on it. We're really excited about the program, and we're really hoping that we can work with many of you in terms of our phase 3 trial. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Mindy, Matt, Abby, and Dan for your insightful presentation. Now, so we have a few questions, and I think if there's any question in the audience, feel free to chime in as well. So this is really exciting time for us, right? Because when I started my residency, there was no study for Duchenne's. And then when the first trial comes along, PTC, we saw a child who was on that study, and he was sort of the unicorn, right? Everybody want to come by and touch him and talk to him. But now we have so many options and available treatments and therapies that are effective and available to our patients. So how do you, when you think about the landscape of this, how do you think that your treatment would be applied to the overall currently approved treatments? And so talk a little bit about combination therapy or multiple therapies in patients. And Mindy, you're next to me, so you're
okay.
You get the.
Well, I mean, I think I was around in those days when the unicorn was discovered. I totally remember being at conferences where there was no industry because there were no clinical trials. So we've come a long way in the time that I've been involved in the community. And, besides a cure, all we've really been working for is more options for patients. We want to get to a place where a child's got several available therapies to try. I think one thing that we've learned over the years is that one Duchenne patient is exactly that, one unique Duchenne patient. Boys tolerate drugs differently as humans do, as adults do, And I think the more options that we have, I think physicians would welcome an opportunity to assess each individual boy and decide on a therapeutic combination that would work best in that individual boy. And I also am a firm believer as we keep developing drugs, many of them may have side effects. So we need to also keep an eye on, as we're combining therapies, we're also combining side effects. Another very important point, I think. So, we get more options, we get different side effect profiles. We have just a whole new world of opportunity to treat these boys.
Thank you so much. Matt, Abby, and Dan, do you have any?
Yeah, I would agree. You showed that slide in the beginning of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of different factors that can affect what happens to a person. And so that tells you that it's likely going to need to be a combination of therapies to have the best effect. That we can think of having therapies that can work on inflammation, right? The idea of the concept behind steroids is to decrease inflammation, get the cells in a better place. Well, you can think that how important that might be when we have gene therapies or therapies that work on DNA or other parts of the disease, that if the cell overall is healthier, less inflamed, less angry, it'll allow these other therapies to work even better.
True.
And in fact, there's data and studies to support that. So I think that we should be thinking about the future being one for Duchenne, like other complicated diseases, where it's probably going to be a couple different therapies that work on different parts and that are going to work together to have the best possible success. I think the best news of all is that there's available therapies now that are great, and there's so much research going on and excitement that continues to move the field forward, and that we all continue to learn for each other. But I think the idea is that we'll end up in the end with combinations of therapies that work for patients at different stages of disease and different times and tackle different parts of this really complicated disease.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is an exciting time. New therapies now for Duchenne, and I think in terms of combination therapies, I think what we're going to look for is a synergistic approach. It would be nice not to see one therapy being added on to another therapy, but one therapy really augmenting and improving other therapies. And so many of the therapies are impacting the cell, increasing, for example, dystrophin or dystrophin-like, but a healthy cell, a cell that lives longer, a cell that's happier, obviously when you're changing the cell in a way to change dystrophin is going to be a synergistic then approach. And I think it will be really interesting as we look at single therapies, and so many companies now looking at a single therapy. I think it will really be interesting to start to look at combination therapies. And I think the platform in which we do that will also be interesting. Mm-hmm. Right now it's Capricor with their Cap1002. It's Edwise with your combination or your drug. Mm-hmm. But what's really going to be interesting, I think, in the future, and hopefully we're not too far off, is when companies can start to cooperate and design more of a platform type trial where boys from a large segment of the population can come in and we can all study our drugs and see which of these combinations really do make sense. So I think it's exciting. Combination therapy is exciting because of the outcomes we may see, but I also think it's an opportunity for us to maybe rethink how we develop our compounds, because this is a rare disease and it is a close-knit community, and that type of cooperation I think would benefit the development and the evaluation of combinations.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah. Good, that's it. And wearing my old patient advocacy hat, I mean, the platform trial is a very near and dear concept to me, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I love the title of this panel, Beyond Dystrophin, because I think that, I agree with everything that we've all talked about. It's clearly got to be a combination of things. And even if we look at some of the therapies that, and rightly so, we're very excited about, the exon skipping and the gene therapy, that, we often hear that they're turning Duchenne into Becker. Well, we're working in Becker right now, and there's a huge unmet need in Becker. So there's still room to, have some benefit even when you've, quote, turned a Duchenne into Becker. So I think it's really important that we all work together and look to how we can provide that, because it's not just going to be one single thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think that's really important for us to realize. And currently, some of our patients are on multiple therapies, right? So if you think about heart conditions, treatments, if you think about steroids, and then if you're on a study, or if you're on some kind of exon skipping, that's another therapy. So I think that some of the patients and some of our boys are already on some kind of combination therapy. So along the line of combination therapy, there's been struggle and challenges in getting approval and the cost and the burden of combination of treatments. I think so there's two types of burden, right? So there's one type of burden where you're on multiple therapies. So say if you're on exon skipping, you have to get infusion, but also if you're on another infusion therapy, then that's multiple physical burden on top of your daily busy life. But also there's the cost burden of the treatments, right? So, I think a lot of our families here are in the situations where insurance are not approving and not covering the drug that they desperately need. So, I just want to speak, well, Mindy, from your personal experience.
Well, I think it's great to have, the burden of treatment is a great thing to have. It's a good problem to have. It's way better than not having a burden of treatment, which is kind of the situation we were in 25 years ago. So, the costs and the implications on your daily life, I think that patient advocacy has really started turning a little bit more toward reimbursement and access challenges and supporting patients. There's a lot of kids that are already in an advanced state of disease progression, so we're going to have a very wide-ranging level of disability in our community. If a lot of these therapies are becoming more effective, I think there's going to be kids that still need a lot of support in their home modifications, their van modifications, their home nursing care. All the things that we all need to have a good quality of life are still going to be there. So I really have been pleased to see the patient advocacy groups starting to focus more on patient needs, because they're only going to increase. We're going to have healthier patients that are living longer. We're going to have aging parents. We have a whole new set of problems that are caused by all the advances that have been made. And it's a fantastic and wonderful place to be. And I wish my child was 6.
Thank you. Matt?
We set up something called Ptc Cares to exactly deal with this challenge. And what we have with Ptc Cares is a group of case managers who are there to help patients and families navigate this really challenging landscape. As you pointed out, having the disease burden is bad enough, is enough of a challenge. Why should there be as much of a challenge to get treatment? And so what our case managers do at Ptc Cares is really help shepherd families through the process of getting prescriptions, going back to the physicians, getting the necessary detail to get that, understand what reimbursement options there are, what are options for copay. We also can help facilitate bridge funding or patients assistance programs. So it's really a mechanism that addresses this challenge with specially trained folks who really step in and help shepherd families through this process. If anyone's interested in learning more about that, it's ptccares.com. There's also information at our booth. But again, it's really set up to have case managers who can really help from start to finish, getting the prescription set, dealing with the specialty pharmacies, getting drug to patients, reminders about refills, all those important steps along the way. So the path to a treatment is not a burden in of itself.
Thank you.
We're in a little bit different stage. We don't have a therapy that's even close to approval yet, but I think it all comes down to data. When you're trying to make that, that case, you have to show the data. And one trend that I really like that the regulators are going down is, I think you've probably all heard of PFDD, patient-focused drug development, and more the regulators are asking for that patient experience data that I mentioned at the beginning, and they're even asking it in the context of a trial, rather than like the poll change of 1 point. Like, what did that mean to a patient? How does a patient experience that 1 point change? And I think when we go farther down that path and really gather your evidence, that is going to make this whole question of getting access and reimbursement make it easier. That's my hope.
1,000% agree. I mean, patient centricity in our trials these days, especially with the outcomes that we're looking at, is critical. And it is going to boil down to data. You know, what can we as a company show payers, regulators, patients, families? What can we show you that helps you understand and make decisions about a product or a compound or a drug? And it really does, it's frustrating for somebody in development because we do need to do things like the poll. But we have secondary endpoints in studies also that are often very patient-centric. Like one that I really enjoy and that I think that I see a lot of value in is a DVA, a Duchenne video assessment, which is done in the home, in activities of daily living, with patients, you know, watching them and videoing them with activities during the day. And I find this very valuable, and it's nice to have it in as secondary endpoints and exploratory endpoints in our studies. But I agree fully. It boils down to us giving families and patients the data. I mean, you're smart. You need to see what we see and understand, and then try to do a better job in terms of identifying a responder and somebody who's not a responder. Because, you know, these compounds are expensive, but nothing's more expensive than to take something and really not be getting what you should be out of it. So, and I love the idea of PTC Care. You know, I hope we get the opportunity someday to have Capricorn Care or something, because I love the idea of a company investing time and effort in helping patients navigate, okay? That's just brilliant. So I hope I have the opportunity someday to generate something like that.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. So lastly, I think, so fast forward maybe 5 years from now, hopefully all of our drugs will be approved and available to our boys. What do you think in terms of the standard of care moving forward? And not only for the treatment, but also, as Mindy mentioned, you know, our kids are living longer because of these advances in innovative therapies, but also, you know, how does physicians approach these options, right? So, I don't know, Mindy, I'll always start with you first.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think physicians are, you know, obviously it's going to become more complex for them. There's going to be a lot more, but I think it must be a physician's dream to have a child that's got a diagnosis as serious and as complex as Duchenne, to be able to do and say more than, I'm sorry, we have this, it can do X, Y, Z, but you know, there's really not a lot that we can say to you at this point. I think that I would love to see a situation where a doctor had plenty to say and plenty of things to discuss and when and how. I agree that some of these agents may be more time effective during a certain stage of progression. But how great would it be to have something that they could switch over to or take instead, or address a new problem that the disease is, in a new way the disease is manifesting itself, you know. So I think that doctors are probably pretty excited. I would be.
Yeah. Do you, obviously you are immersed in the research and the up and coming therapies. And a lot of our neurologists are in clinical trials and up to date, but there may be some out there that may not necessarily know about Capricorn, Edgewise, or you know, some of the newer treatments. How do you think do you think then that the role of the parent and the family coming to a physician, probably knowing more than the physician themselves, how do you think that kind of will pan out in the future in the next couple of years?
Are you looking at me again?
Yes. I'm sorry, man. I'll get you a cup of coffee later.
You know, honestly, as much as social media can be a terrible thing too, I think, we're all seeing a lot of horrible things out in the world social media has been an amazing tool for our community. There are a lot of things that aren't true out there too in our community, but parents communicating and coming to events like this and being connected in ways they never were in the past is huge. It's a rare disease. At the end of the day, it is a rare disease. You can't expect every physician out there to know everything that's available to patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So having a good education as a parent is the very best thing that you can do. I know it's difficult, and I know you'd rather not know, and you'd rather not think about the future. And there is a huge, huge benefit of not dwelling in the future. But you need to prepare for the future, and you need to keep yourself educated about what's out there and what may be of benefit to your child, and getting connected with other parents and finding out what resources are out there. Resources will change your life. Get hooked in, get connected. Your child has Duchenne. I don't see that changing in any time, in any of the boys that are alive right now's lifetime. They're still going to have a muscular dystrophy, and they're still going to need supports, and you are still going to need supports. So don't pretend this isn't happening.
That's tough to follow.
It is. I think the theme of today, from Deborah's opening to Patrick and Justin to Mindy's comments, is the importance of community. I fully agree. I think the dynamics are such that social media becomes such an important tool for patients and families to communicate with each other. I think in many ways, if you ask us to imagine 5 years from now, I think that's going to be increasingly the case, where social media is probably going to be the source of information, whether that be from companies, from other families, from patients. It's going to be the natural communication flow. I also want to say that, when we think back to when PTC started as the first company in this field, and inventing the concept of drug development Duchenne, to think of a current state and a future state with even more therapy options is incredibly exciting. I think it will be very important, as we've already talked about, and Dan and Abby talked about it, the importance of data and information, understanding which therapies work at different stages of the diseases and different ages. I think I mentioned in my presentation some of the work we've done to try to understand that and appreciate that some therapies like the Deflazacort has benefit throughout the lifetime. But we're going to have to understand for each individual what's the right combination at the right time. And I think that's going to be something for the physicians to obviously, and the physician experts to understand, but I think also the sharing of experiences between patients and families.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I love that vision in 5 years where there's like so many things to learn about and parents are getting connected. And even more, I'd like to take it one step further though, because I think that we're part of a healthcare delivery system in our country that leaves out some people. The whole diversity, equity, inclusion sort of factor, and those underserved, and you guys are not the underserved because you're here. So I think it's our responsibility to, again, in the spirit of collaboration and community, to do what we can to reach out to those types of communities. I've heard of recently, a clinician is going to moderate a panel for one of the advocacy organizations, and she made it a requirement that it was simultaneously translated into Spanish. So there's a small start, and I think if we can all start thinking of things like that, that we will get the message out to even the broader group, the broader community, the ones that aren't the most likely to be, plugged into the right places.
I'm always last, so I can agree with everybody.
I feel you.
Mix it up.
We'll switch
Maybe
next
we
time.
should
I'd like the diversity twist here. I mean, we have so many underserved populations, and really reaching out to them. And one that I feel a lot of passion for also is we see a lot of studies in our younger Duchenne patients, and we don't see as many studies in our older Duchenne patients. And so I'd like to carry the diversity to that level also. We need to understand and we need to do more work in our older Duchenne patients as a mechanism also of increasing diversity.
Yep, I definitely agree.
Right, that's an important point. So we have a few minutes left. I can continue to ask questions, but if there's anyone in the audience that has any questions for any of our panelists, yeah.
My grandson's been on prednisone since day one, 13, 14 years. And we have enough guilt in this community to start with. And I don't mean that your presentation added to it, but when you see things up there that say the Nevada's court will do this and this and this, I would be worried to take him off prednisone right now because he's one of the kids that is doing well. So I just want to make sure that parents understand that it's available and it's showing progress and it's showing good things. But if your kid is working and he ain't broke, don't change it. I really think that that message has to be given to parents as well. Because we can't do it, he's 17 years old now. And maybe now that we know he could have had 3 more years, we didn't know that 10 years ago. So we stayed the course. So that's just a concern of mine, that we don't add any more guilt
Yeah.
treatment-wise. When we know better, we do better. We all do. It's for our kids and our grandkids. But to look back and say, oh, I wish I would have, or dang, it wasn't there, or why didn't somebody tell me? Sometimes it's okay to stay the course where you're at,
Yeah, and I would,
if it's working.
of course, as a as a physician myself and as a human, of course. I mean, we're here to merely share data and information that we have, but you can only know today what you know today. You couldn't know yesterday what you know today, and by all means, parents and together with their physicians should make the best decision for each individual. Absolutely. And that's where those decisions have to be made based on the information known at the time and based on the individual patient. I think that's what we all would want. And we're basically here just to provide information to help guide those decisions between parents and families and physicians.
All about options.
Yeah.
And this is very similar to what Mindy had mentioned about she wished her son was six years again. So I think it's, in addition to caring for your child, it's the guilt of, I wish he was younger. I wish he was have better pull so we can be in this study. So I think there's always that guilt, and I think everyone do their best that they can, and not everyone is the same. So I think we have 4 more minutes left. Is there anything else you want to mention or say to the audience? And I won't start with you, Mindy. Abby.
Go to the Camino if you can. No, I just, these meetings are just so informative, we hope for you, but they're really informative for us. They're inspiring for us. It's why we go back to work every day feeling very motivated. There's still work to be done in Duchenne, and I think that's why we're all here.
I could add one thing for the organizers of conferences and for the community. I know it's wonderful to be back in person, but I do love the hybrid now because as we all know, as the